Good evening, everybody. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the South Haven City Council. It's Monday, February the 21st, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The invocation this evening will be given by Pastor Aaron Cobbs of the Spiritual Church of Christ. And good evening, Pastor Cobbs.
Good evening. Heavenly Father, we come to you today, and we just want to thank you for this day. Father, we are asking you for your guidance, your wisdom, and your support as council begin this meeting. We ask you for your understanding to lead them in the right direction. Help them to have meaningful discussion and help them to work for the good of all in the city. And we ask your protection upon all the public services, the ones that serve and protect. We ask you to put your protection around them as they go through their dangerous job day after day. And we thank you and we give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. If you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call. Megan.
Jeff Arnold.
Here.
Wendy Onuki.
Here.
Joe Reeser.
Here.
Steve Schlack.
Here.
George Sleeper.
Here.
Letitia Wilkins. Scott Smith.
Here.
Make a motion to excuse Letitia Wilkins.
Second.
Motion and second to excuse Letitia Wilkins. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. She is excused. That takes us to the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is approved. Thank you. Next, we have a swearing-in ceremony for one of our newest officers, Officer Joshua Lee. Good evening, Chief. Good evening, Joshua. Welcome.
Give an introduction. Thank you. So tonight I would like to introduce Officer Joshua Lee. He joined the South Haven Police Department on January 31st. Joshua graduated from the Grand Rapids Community College Police Academy in August of 2021, and the South Haven Police Department will be his first law enforcement position. Joshua holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Ferris State University. So we are very fortunate to have him on board. He is currently in his FTO training, and he will be on solo patrol in spring. So he'll be ready for our busy summer.
Very good. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
He has a pretty large grouping of his family here, so welcome them. So.
Welcome to all of you as well. So we're glad you're all here.
All right, so I will have you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of Police Officer of the City of South Haven, Michigan, according to the best of your ability?
I do.
Wonderful.
Officer Lee is officially badge number 617.
Well, enjoy our community. Have a lot of fun.
Congratulations. Good job.
They're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. Enjoy. Thank you. Welcome. All right, very good. That takes us to the consent agenda, items A through C.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through C.
Second.
Motion, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Arnold.
Yes.
Onuki.
Yes.
Reeser.
Yes.
Schlack.
Yes.
Sleeper.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. That takes us to old business. City Council will be asked to consider the following actions regarding adult use marijuana safety compliance facilities. First, we are going to hold a public hearing on the proposed ordinances number 1078 and 1079. And following that public hearing, we will actually be voting on those two items. So I will seek a motion to open.
I'll make a
the public
motion
hearing.
to open the public hearing.
Second.
Got a motion, we got a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Public hearing is open. Who's got this one?
Well, I'll start and I'll let Nick or Griffin fill in. So the council is being asked to conduct a public hearing tonight to consider the adoption of a package of proposed zoning and regulatory code ordinance amendments that would allow for adult use marijuana safety compliance facilities to operate in the marijuana business overlay zone. These amendments were requested by New Age Laboratories, who are here today, which is a business that's located at 160 Veterans Boulevard, and they are currently doing safety compliance of medical marijuana. They would like to provide the testing for the adult use marijuana businesses. We have run these through the Planning Commission. We do have recommendations from the Planning Commission for these two ordinances. Nick, can you break down what the two ordinances are?
Sure. So the first ordinance is a zoning ordinance that adds this to the list of permitted uses in the overlay zone. And then the second is a amendment to the city code that provides essentially the permitting process for this business. And the way that would work is they would be entitled to a state level. The existing operation would be entitled to a state to apply for a state level operating permit, and we've just essentially updated the language that was limited to medical marijuana to also apply to the regulatory side for the specific type of business, which is a safety compliance business only.
Okay. Sounds good. How about public? We will take your comments now. If anyone wants to come up.
Sure,
state
we
your-
have two people right now. We have David Veenstra and then Scott Wall.
Okay, perfect. Got Scott going first. And then just state your name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
I'm Scott Wall. I'm the owner of New Age Laboratories, and I want to thank you for taking this issue before the City Council. New Age Laboratory is currently pre-qualified for the medical marijuana safety compliance testing. Hopefully this spring, we will begin construction on the expansion to the laboratory, which will give us the square footage that we need to actually do this testing by the state regulations. We have to keep this part of the testing separate from what we're already doing. And so this is a very unique situation with the state. There's very clear and onus regulations on how this has to be separated from the current testing that we're already doing. Probably the biggest issue for asking for the adult use is that since the adult use has been approved in the state of Michigan, the industry has shifted considerably to being almost entirely adult use. The fact that anyone can now go into a dispensary and purchase cannabis almost undermines the medical use purpose. So now the cannabis industry is 90% adult use, 10% medical. And so with the number of clients that we currently work with from the agricultural, horticultural standpoint, even if we are now pre-qualified with the medical, if we were to start doing the safety compliance completion with the new addition come June, once we get that in and get the final inspection, we would only have access to 10% of the business that we could theoretically access. So by being able to have this new ordinance in place and allowing us to get the additional adult use, we'll be able to access the entire industry here in the state of Michigan. So, and I think it's also critical that as we move forward, and it's probably somewhere in the next 3 to 5 years, we might be looking at the federal industry or the federal government moving towards approval of a legalized marijuana industry. That, you know, we'll have a business right here in South Haven that could actually be doing business on a national basis, that, you know, it wouldn't be limited just to the state of Michigan. So, do you have any questions that I could answer for you?
Mr. Wall, you said this would allow you to grow the business. Would that mean you would be able to add more employees?
Yes,
Create
absolutely.
new jobs for South Haven?
Correct. So currently, we are already looking for at least 2 new employees just for coming into the spring, because we're now getting into our busiest season. So we're looking for what we call field reps or field technicians, where we can go out and we actually collect and pick up samples directly from facilities. That's a requirement under the law with the marijuana safety compliance facility. So even though we do this for our non-marijuana clients, it's a requirement under the marijuana regulations, both medical and adult use. So a facility cannot collect their own samples and then bring them to the laboratory. They have to actually schedule us to come to their facility. We have to do the sampling and the collection, and then we put them in a sealed transport container, and then we bring them to the laboratory. At that point, we take possession of that, and it goes into the state's monitoring program called Metrics. And then, so whatever the amount that we sample, let's say it's a half a pound out of their total, that goes in. We have to account for every ounce of that sample. So whatever we destroy in the actual analysis, anything that's left over, we then have to account for it and destroy it so that it cannot be used in any human consumption.
Good.
With the transportation, that doesn't, do you already have the transportation permit, or?
No, that doesn't have to be done under the transportation.
So being the laboratory, you already qualify to be able to
right.
transport?
Yeah, it's a de minimis amount, so that's why.
So we're not authorizing any new
No,
transport
it's not any
facility?
new
Okay.
type of facility, correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any others? So adding jobs, it'll strengthen the bottom line. Just for those that aren't familiar, to share how long you've been in business, and then just
We moved, so New Age Laboratories was created in 1998 when we split off from Landmark Technologies, an environmental company. And we moved from Benton Harbor to South Haven in 2009. So we're actually, you know, pushing now 13 years here. So it's a pleasure to now be expanding, and we've got an extra 2 acres next to the facility that we're already on. So the ability for us to get actually larger is actually quite exciting, so.
okay, very good. It's great. We're glad you're able to expand. So thanks,
thank
Scott.
you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right, and then just, I don't know if we let everybody know, but there are comment cards are still located on the table there. So if there's any topic that's on this agenda you want to speak to, just make sure you get your name on a comment card and get it up here. So next was,
We have David Veenstra.
okay. Good evening, Dave.
David Veenstra, 1220 Monroe Boulevard. I'd like to speak in favor of this proposal. This is a legal activity that will bring jobs to South Haven. And I know that one of the objections is that we had a vote on this and it was voted down by the city. But the point to me is that that was a much larger proposal. It covered all different areas, whereas this is very limited in scope. So some of the people that voted in that original vote may well have voted in favor of this, but what they were voting on was recreational marijuana, and the opposition to that is much greater. I am surprised that the lifespan of that vote is only 2 years. I would say that going forward, I think it would be a good idea for council to consider changing that rule. Even though in this particular situation, I think there's a much more limited scope to it, I think people should feel that, once they voted on something that will stand for a longer period of time, without being undermined in any way. But again, in this particular situation, this is such a narrow slice, both in the activity and also the geography of it. I think that the council has dealt really well with the objections to it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. We had no other cards. Was there anybody else on this topic? On this topic. Okay. All right.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is closed. All right, so that moves us down to, we will be asked to consider the adoption of ordinance number 1078, which is an ordinance to amend sections 1510.35 and 2300 of the South Haven zoning ordinance to authorize and regulate adult use marijuana safety compliance facilities as special uses in the marijuana business overlay zoning district.
I'll make a motion to change the ordinance number 1078 and ordinance to amend sections 1510.35 and 2300 of the South Haven zoning ordinances to authorize and regulate adult use marijuana safety compliance facilities as special use in the marijuana business overlay zoning district.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion second. We've heard the topic. Anybody have any other questions for staff before we vote? No. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is
No.
approved. Oh, sorry. One no. Very good. All right, next item, council will be asked to consider adoption of ordinance number 1079, which is an ordinance to amend Article 4 of Chapter 14 of the South Haven Code of Ordinances and repeal Article 5 of that same chapter in order to permit authorization of adult use marijuana safety compliance facilities operated in accordance with state law.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Any other questions for staff? No. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no.
No.
All right, it passes. Very good. And let's roll on. All right. Next, City Council will be asked to consider the following actions regarding an amendment to the Harbor Club Planned Unit Development. And here again, we'll be holding a public hearing.
I make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're open. Very good. All right. Kate, who's got this one?
Thank you. I think that Griffin is well versed on what we're going to be doing here tonight, so I'll ask Griffin to summarize for the public hearing.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So Mr. Scott Sinar and his associated businesses are representing the Harbor Club Condominium PUD project. They applied for a PUD amendment to construct a community swimming pool and adjoining clubhouse facility. Specifically, this PUD has been amended 4 times since its inception, and the applicant's now seeking a 5th amendment to remove 4 units that would have been impacted by the swimming pool and adjoining clubhouse facility, with the possibility of relocating those 4 units and a subsequent phase of the project. So to clarify, the developer is looking to remove them at this time, but not seeking relocation with this amendment. This project went before the Planning Commission. There was some discussion on the history of the project. You can see a pretty thorough summary included in the memo. And really the only note I have besides some of our standard conditions is an additional condition was added by the Planning Commission for the applicant to provide some privacy screening in the form of either a vegetative barrier that would be 80% opaque year-round or some kind of fence structure along the entire length of Ravine Lane. There were some concerns from an adjacent property owner about noise and disruption caused by the proposed pool and clubhouse facility. But with that, I know that the city attorney and I are happy to answer any questions. This has been on the docket for a few months now, and I do believe there are representatives here for the project if there are any questions from the applicant.
Okay. Well, why don't we're in a public hearing, so do we have some cards? Maybe we'll get that part done, and then if that...
Right, we have one card from Stuart Chipman, I can't read the last name, on behalf of Joe Ashen.
All right. Good evening. Come on up. Just state your name and address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and my last name is Stuart Chipman Bergsma. I represent Joe Ashen, who's the adjacent property owner, and his address is on the comment card. It's not mine, so I don't know it by heart. Your Honor, sorry, that's a trick of the trade there. Mr. Mayor, we came to the Planning Commission, and Joe had a few concerns we raised with the Planning Commission. They saw fit to address one of them and not grant our request as to the other. But one of the concerns was this big pile of dirt at the end of Ravine Road. That just hasn't been taken care of. At that meeting, the development promised to get rid of that within 5 days. It's been a month. It's still there. In my own communications with Mr. Sinar, where we were amicably trying to work this out, and I believe Mr. Sinar actually got lunch with my client today in a further effort to come to an agreement and not waste the public's time with our figuring these details out. I explained to Mr. Sinar, Joe Ashen grew up here. He's been here a long time. He's aware that this property has a history of contamination, that Mr. Sinar has told the commission that that's resolved. They spent some ungodly amount of money and moved a ton of dirt. Then he claims or asserts that the Brownfield Commission and Eagle at the state signed off on this, and it's the cleanest piece of property in the state now. We don't have any specific reason to be concerned of that other than the pile of dirt. We asked that the Planning Commission slow things down and actually get the documentation to verify that, just to make sure we're not digging holes where we shouldn't yet. Mr. Ashen submitted a FOIA request to the city. We got that back, and it didn't have any records about that in it. We have an outstanding FOIA request to the state, to the DEQ, now Eagle, just to, again, put Mr. Ashen's concerns to rest so that he can sleep at night and know that there's no contamination issue anymore. I don't know why the development, and Mr. Sinar's told me they've had kind of a history of people being paranoid about this and having to address those concerns. I don't know why they don't have those readily available to give to the commission and the council and to anybody who's concerned and say, here are the reports, everything's cleaned up. I know Mr. Ashen would appreciate it. So again, he doesn't have to be concerned, but I told Mr. Sinar, hey, one of the things that has Joe worried is that this pile of dirt's still there. It's been there for months. You were told to move it. You promised to move it, and he seems to be unable to move it. And I don't know if that's just, we don't know why. But Joe's concerned that maybe nobody wants to move it. I hope that's not the case. Mr. Sinar assures me it's not the case, but there it is, still there today. Joe texted me pictures, so we'd sure ask the council to refuse to allow this to progress anymore until Mr. Sinar and the development keeps their promise and gets rid of this giant mound of dirt, because it seems that promising to do so hasn't resulted in it actually being taken care of when the city allows him to progress with his project. The other issue that we'd raise is the 6-foot fence was a condition originally recommended back when the pool was supposed to be, quite a bit further from the boundary line. Every time they amend this, the pool gets a little bit closer to Mr. Ashen's property. Mr. Ashen would appreciate the council adopting an 8-foot fence requirement rather than a 6-foot fence, because that pool has gotten closer to his property, along with a parking lot and a clubhouse. I believe he discussed that with Mr. Sinar today. The explanation he got was, we don't have money to build an 8-foot fence. And that just strikes me as surprising. If you got money to build a pool and a clubhouse, I think an 8-foot fence isn't some drastic cost that can't be paid for. I drive a Dodge pickup. My truck's more than 6 feet tall. If Mr. Ashen's trying to keep his property kind of serene woods, having a 6-foot fence, you're going to see the top of cars coming and going to this new parking lot and this clubhouse. So he just asked that the council consider an 8-foot fence and have that back 2 feet from the property line, because Mr. Sinar raised that they think they're going to have to trim a lot of trees. So, for Joe, he'd appreciate an 8-foot fence along Ravine Road, keep the noise down, keep the light pollution down, and generally keep his property woods rather than feeling like it's part of a neighborhood. I think we raised with the city, a lot of the residents or people who rent homes on a short-term basis in that area, they kind of wander into his woods and, not camp out there with tents, but hang out in his woods assuming it's part of the development. And so this barrier will help keep that separate, keep the complaints down, and he appreciates it. And so he doesn't want his trees trimmed, and really as a condition of the fence, we'd ask that the city make it a condition for the developer that fence get built before they start construction. Joe really doesn't want to stare at a whole bunch of heavy equipment going back and forth and heavy construction any more than he does a pool. Seems like it'd be a pretty simple thing to get an 8-foot fence in along the line of Ravine Road before they start with the construction. It's March. Nobody's going to be swimming at a pool soon.
That's done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Thank you, Joe. And was that it on the cards?
That's the only card we received on this item.
So we're good here. Okay.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All right, motion second to close that public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, it is closed. All right, next, City Council will be asked to consider the approval of the proposed amendment to the Harbor Club condominium PUD in accordance with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, specifically conditions 1 through 7 from their January 6, 2022 meeting. We can start with that.
I had some questions for staff, too. We need motion first.
Well, let's ask. Go ahead.
So my question would be relating to our speakers. The pile of dirt and that was agreement between those two gentlemen. The city's not involved in that because that occurred at the Planning Commission. He mentioned the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission was not involved in that. That was just the owner and the neighbor.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So we certainly don't want to see it, but I'm just clarifying the city's not involved in that. We didn't make a deal to move a dirt.
He didn't make the promise to me, Mr. Mayor. He made it to the commission. There was not an agreement between me and Mr. Sinar.
Yes. That's
Griffin?
okay.
I was looking at Griffin's. You want to
Yeah.
comment?
I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a problem with having a pile of dirt on your property?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm just wondering why.
He expressed concern about contaminants, and it sounds like we're getting a FOIA going, and the attorney's going to get to the bottom of that, but that's not us, again.
That's right. It's an issue raised by the neighboring property owner. There's
Mr.
nothing
Asher,
in the
yeah.
ordinance that would prohibit that.
Okay.
Okay. So that was one.
'Cause my concern is we don't need to move this dirt before we pass this. We don't have to worry about that. Okay. So then my second concern is this, on page 56, item number 7, it says the applicant shall provide a privacy screening structure or a vegetative barrier. I would think we need to clarify that it should be and.
And
So we have-
6 foot is allowed by,
By ordinance.
By ordinance,
We don't,
not 8.
an 8-foot barrier is not allowed, or an 8-foot fence, rather, is not allowed. Yeah, a variance would have to be sought by the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't believe that we can make a condition of a PUD of something that's not allowed in the ordinance. Is that correct, Nick?
Yes, that would be odd. I don't think you could do that. It would have to be subject at least to ZBA approval.
so at least,
Okay.
if we make a motion, it should at least be the 6, not the 8.
And we'll remove that or and make it an and.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Those are.
And I say that because it's not allowed in the residential districts. An 8-foot fence is provided in Section 1101, the industrial district. This is not contemplated in the residential district.
Right.
No.
No,
I'm sorry, sir.
we're good, Joe. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and, want to make that,
Let's see, that's right, I'm off the. Sorry.
want to make that motion?
I had to get back.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the proposed amendment to the Harbor Club condominium PUD in accordance to the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, specifically conditions 1 through 7, including the notes about changing that or to and least a 6-foot fence.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Again, item 7 becoming an and, so a vegetative area as well as the 6-foot fence. Discussion. Makes sense?
That makes sense.
Because you sat through this already once, so that makes,
Yeah.
okay, sounds good. All right, we have got no questions. We got a motion, we got a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. It's approved. Very good. Next, new business. City Council will be asked to consider approval of a bid from Lawn Boys, Inc. in the amount of $119,230 and authorize staff to execute the necessary documents.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve a bid from Lawn Boys in the amount of $119,230 and authorize staff to execute the necessary documents.
Second?
All right, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Aaron, good evening.
I was up
You're
here,
up.
Aaron Preeb, 604 64th Street, Park Superintendent for the city. I'm here representing the Board of Public Utilities and Public Works on this agenda item to answer any questions or an explanation for it. In summary, we've been just working on this project for a while, trying to kind of address our shortage of summer parks and cemetery staff who's responsible for all of this mowing. We did an audit. I've been working with Bill Hunter and Ryan Bosher on this project. We did an audit on all of our mowing sections, and we came up with these 42 sites that are kind of a large, extensive mowing. It's pretty simple to do, keeping some of the smaller, more intricate landscaping parts on staff. We thought if we put this on to the responsibility of a contractor, that would allow our summer staff to concentrate on more of the things like putting the shine back on South Haven, concentrating on the downtown, making everything, healthy and nice and pretty and good looking instead of spending 3 to 4 days a week mowing lawns all the time. So that's how we came up with this list. We still got plenty of our own to do, and we're just looking for the approval for that contract for Lawn Boys.
I should also clarify that if council approves this mowing bid, we would decrease the number of seasonal staff that we'd hire for this department. This contract would help us fertilize, do the lawn treatments, irrigation, doing the startups for all around the city. This would take a lot of the burden off. Again, we would reduce the park staff from 10 to 6.
Correct.
Yep, sounds good.
Question for you from reducing the size of the staff from 10 to 6, the savings was noted in our package of $76,800, and does that include workman's comp costs and all that stuff, or is that just wages savings?
I believe that's just wages.
So our savings would actually be more than that, then would
It
it
actually would
not?
be more.
Okay, thank you.
My question, if you're just glancing at this, the Lawn Boys bid was larger, but once removed the cemetery, it came in lower, and that's why.
It did, and in talking with Bill and then Aaron, we believe that our staff, the 6 seasonal that we would be hiring, would be able to handle the cemetery, which was a larger component in the other bid.
And I'm just saying that Lawn Boys is actually the lowest bid.
It is, yes.
Once you adjust for the cemetery.
That's correct.
Okay, yep.
And again, it's directly related to just our ability to get enough staff, have enough people to do these lawns, and make sure we're keeping up. So
That's correct.
this could change. This might, in the future, could revert back, but this is for this year, this summer, to get us going again.
Yep.
That's correct.
So,
Correct.
very good. Oh, good work. Any other questions down here? All right, seeing none. Got a motion, we got a second. Any public questions on this topic? Got none? Okay. Aaron, thank you, appreciate it. All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is approved, very good. All right, special events, yay. All right, let's do a couple. Special event 2021-01, Worship on the Riverwalk 2022, to be held on July the 10th, 17th, and 24th from 7 p.m. until 8:15 p.m. with a sound check from 5 p.m. until 6 p.m. to take place at Riverfront Park on Water Street.
Make a motion to approve special event 2022-01, Worship on the Riverwalk 2022.
Second?
All right, we've got a motion. We've got a second. See Stephen out there.
I don't see Pastor Smulligan here, but I can summarize. This is an event that's gone on for 6 years. This will be for 3 Sundays in July, and we did note the time from 7 p.m. to 8:15 p.m. We did note that they have an hour to do sound checks, but this is an event that seems to go really well. And again, it's limited to those 3 Sundays in July.
Yep. And they've done a real good job in the past of sticking to their times and keeping the neighbors happy, so that's great. Public questions on this one? All right. Council questions? Nothing. Motion second to approve special event 2022-01 Worship on the Riverwalk. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's approved. Next, special event 2022-02 South Haven Steelheaders Fishing Tournament 2022 to be held on May the 13th through the 15th, 2022 at the South Marina with a drive-through weigh-in station and award ceremony to take place at the Black River Park.
Make a motion to approve special event 2022-02 South Haven Steelheaders Fishing Tournament 2022 to be held May 13th through the 15th, 2022, and the South Marina with a drive-through weigh-in station awards ceremony to take place at Black River Park.
Second.
All right, we got a motion, we got a second. Anyone here from Steelheaders? Nope.
I can summarize this
Got it.
event as well. The Steelheaders have successfully been running this 3-day fishing tournament for some time. We did last year alter the how this event flows by having them go to Black River Park for the weigh-in and the award ceremony. That seems to work out really, really well, as they can immediately go ahead and clean the fish at the new fish cleaning station. So they have once again come to this body to approve the fishing tournament, the Pro-Am fishing tournament for this May.
Perfect. Sounds good. And hopefully they'll get some good weather. Public questions on this one? All's quiet. Council? We're all ready. All right, motion second to approve special event 2022-02 South Haven Steelheader Fishing Tournament. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's approved. Next, special event 2022-03 Harbor Fest 2022 to be held June the 17th to the 19th at Riverfront Park on Water Street.
I'll make a motion to approve special event 2022-03 Harborfest 2022 to be held June 17th through 19th, 2022 at Riverfront Park on Water Street.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion. We've got a second. Harborfest? Anybody here? Kate, tell me about Harborfest.
All right, thank
It's
you, Mayor.
back.
Harborfest is back. This will be running June 17th to the 19th. They are requesting on Sunday for the Dragon Boat races, which they would reopen the road as soon as the race is over. They are planning on having live music, food vendors, and craft vendors. They do plan to put the beer garden in the place where it has been, which is that typical, that small area on the western edge of Riverfront Park. So this is similar to applications in the past.
Excellent, very good. Public questions on this one? Nothing. Council questions?
I just think it's nice that they're planning to have it on my birthday, June 19.
Nice.
How kind of them.
All right,
It's also Father's Day.
very good. All right, happy birthday early. All right, we got a motion, we got a second to approve special event 2022-03 Harborfest 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is approved. Item 12, City Council will be asked to consider the following actions regarding the PUD application for the Overton site. We are going to consider a motion to introduce the PUD application for the Overton site and set a public hearing on the proposed PUD application to occur on Monday, March the 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in council chambers at City Hall. And again, this is just an introduction.
You want to do A and B separate?
We're going to put them right together.
Okay. I'll make a motion to introduce the PUD application for the Overton site and set the public hearing on the proposed PUD application to occur Monday, March 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in City Council chambers at City Hall.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Who wants to start?
Do we want to do public or do we want to do us?
What's that? Oh,
Or do you want staff?
yeah, I'll let staff go out real quick, because this is just introducing it, we're not having a public hearing tonight.
Well, Mayor and City Council, this is coming to the City Council for a planned unit development application for the Overton site. This is coming from the Habitat Company as part of their application, but we brought this here tonight. This is a plan that did not come with a recommendation from the Planning Commission, for those of you who saw that, or George, who was there. This resulted in a tie vote. But this is also the plan where, this is also the time where City Council could also look at the plan unit development as the final decision maker on this plan. There are a number of things that are in here, and we can walk through what they are, or we can take public comment. I guess I'm looking for some direction from you if there's anything specific you'd like us to go into. There is a lot of information that the staff has on this site, and we can walk through that at your leisure or at your preference.
Council preference, public first, staff?
Public first.
Okay. Let's go ahead and let's go through the public comments, and then we'll get some staff input on that, and then let's get some guidance from council on where we want to, if there's stuff we want to see happen before we meet again.
Understood.
And just as a reminder, you'll have up to 5 minutes. Just state your name and address. Come on up, and we'll love to hear what you have to say.
Okay, we have Mary Hosley.
Good evening, Mary Hosley.
Good evening, Mayor. Mary Hasley, 726 North Shore Drive. I am here because I support affordable housing that fits our community and aligns with our master plan and RFQ. Habitat's Overton project does not. I ask that you please do not schedule a meeting for March 7th. It's premature with the deficiencies in Habitat's willfully incomplete application. A critical deficiency includes but is not limited to the parallel plan that Habitat has manipulated since January 13th, 2022, the day my attorney met with city staff to discuss the anomalies with the density bonus because the numbers did not add up to 144. They were less. 8 more dwelling units mysteriously appeared on the parallel plan sent to the city staff the very next day. But that is pittance compared to the Herculean efforts of the city staff with the assistance of city attorney, I'm assuming, to circumvent the required EIS through section 1404, subsection 16. First, city staff failed to even remember the requirement existed despite the city council just having voted on it in July 2021. Second, when Habitat requested a waiver, city staff jumped into even higher to cobble together arguments to support Habitat's waiver request. This is reprehensible. Rather than reviewing why the EIS was mandatory, city staff searched far and wide to find examples of EISs to say it was not necessary. City staff refused to find section 1416 mandatory that made the EIS mandatory. They either ignored or failed to review the legislative history that makes it painfully clear the EIS cannot be waived. The fact that they couched it under the general waiver provisions of a PUD makes a mockery of our zoning ordinance. How can you, the city council, unanimously vote for an amendment in July 2021 requiring an EIS and turn around and say it's not waived, or that it can be waived? Reliance on the old environmental documents show that the city staff and Habitat failed to appreciate the mandatory aspect of the EIS and the reasons the city attorney stated it should be mandatory and so recommended. Section 1416 added the required EIS to a site plan review when certain circumstances are met, which they do apply with Overton. As the proposed ordinance change progressed from the Planning Commission to the City Council for ratification, City Attorney Cruccio recommended that the discretionary may in the early drafts be changed to the mandatory shall in the subsequent drafts. Specifically, in a comment, he stated, I would note that I'm a little bit troubled by the words may, as there is no criteria defining when the Planning Commission should exercise its discretion requiring an EIS. He also commented, my worry is that if they require it for some but not others, developers will claim unfair treatment. At the City Council meeting at which it was adopted, the then city zoning administrator said something like, the city attorney recommended that the Planning Commission change the word may to shall, just so that there is no confusion over whether or not that is an arbitrary decision to be made by the Planning Commission and clarifies when it shall be needed. My attorney commented about this debacle, saying municipal staff and officials should not deliberately thwart their own ordinances in this way. Before any meeting is scheduled for a vote on the Habitat Overton project, City Council is respectfully requested to require these items at least be completed. Section 1302, subsection 1 of our zoning ordinance refers to a non-existent section, and that must be clarified because that involves the waivers. Habitat should provide a fully compliant application and a complete list of waivers. I provided such information to help the city staff identify where these inadequacies, deficiencies are, and where waivers are still required. Habitat's percent AMI, area median income, for at least phase 1, and preferably also rental phase 2, which is phase 3 in the PUD, should be shared. A new authored staff report not recommending a waiver for the EIS be issued. City Council confirm whether Habitat's representation at the February
Got 1 minute,
16th
Mary.
Planning Commission meeting is correct. Habitat said the City Council affirmed Habitat's conceptual plan that was part of the June 21st and October 18th meetings in 2021, in which the City Council voted, was affirmed by that vote. This is contrary to the council's comments that it was just a conception plan and more needed to be done. This should all be done to provide at least 15 days for review. It's worth noting, Attorney Curcio knew or should have known and suggested that mandatory language be applied to the EIS. That should be required. And last but not least, I thank City Councilman Sleeper, who's the liaison to the Planning Commission. He recognized the concern of waiving such a mandatory ordinance just adopted, and he did not support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Dan Agnello.
Thank you. Dan Agnello, 964 Everett Parkway. I agree with what Mary said. I'm glad George voted against it, and there's 3 other commissioners that voted against it. And of course, I got down to density, parking, and also the EIS. And when staff went and at the meeting, after the meeting, they had a meeting with Habitat on the side, and they had to try to exempt it. And then they went and spent 9 pages of city taxes money to try to push it through, instead of have Habitat do it. Habitat was supposed to be doing that with their own consultant. And that's not the first rodeo for Habitat, okay? I'm sure they've done thousands or hundreds of housing developments or apartment developments, and the first thing they should have asked the city was, do we need an EIS? Or they could have spent 5 minutes looking in the documents. We found it in 5 minutes, that the EIS is required. Now, the EIS has a lot of items in it, but some of the items in there that was not addressed in the application was different alternates. They talked about different alternates in these 3 different examples that they gave about what they did and why they came up with the one that they did. As I've mentioned numerous times, and we've all mentioned numerous times, Habitat has not made one alternate yet in 14 months. They knew density was a problem, they knew parking was a problem. And also, the parallel plan is not correct. Instead of putting in those townhomes, 16 townhomes, they made it 16 apartments, and they used the same space for 8 apartments for 16. And the parallel plan is wrong, okay? And I'm glad that the Planning Commission saw that what was going on here, and they've only had a chance to review it a few times, and they saw that there's some problems with this Habitat application. And like I said, they could have made alternates. There's nothing wrong. They said they could build 60 homes or 72 apartments, whatever it was, and 28 townhomes. You'd have 100 units total. And then right now they have 208 parking spaces. They would have more than enough parking spaces that they need, and they could have a lot more green space, a lot more, a lot more playgrounds, picnic areas, and whatever. So I'm glad that it's gone back to the commission. And hopefully it'll go, and the council, hopefully go back to the commission, and I think we've got to do something about density, parking, and the EIS. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kay Engelbrecht.
Hello. Kay Engelbrecht, 125 Elkenberg Street, Unit 4. Others have commented tonight on the required EIS missing from Habitat's application, rendering it incomplete, and I wholeheartedly agree. At the Planning Commission meeting on February 16th, Commissioner Sleeper voted no. He made probably the most important statement of the meeting. This development will be around a lot longer than I will, and it is short-sighted to approve a variance for the EIS. He also expressed concerns about city staff doing the work that is the applicant's responsibility. I hope this sentiment is echoed by city council members, and they will follow Commissioner Sleeper's thoughtful and prudent lead by not voting on this tonight and sending it back. Commissioner Stegman also voted no. Among his comments, he wondered if the Planning Commission would be even considering waiving the EIS if the property was privately owned. The EIS requirement should be enforced regardless of property ownership and certainly enforced due to the city's ownership. Commissioners Heinrich, Varney, and Nichols asked why the developer has not brought forth a plan with less density. Commissioner Varney commented the parking and density are big issues for the community and doesn't understand why there wasn't a proposal for a plan with less density. Commissioner Heinrich stated his frustration and that requests made a few times to reduce density go nowhere. Commissioner Gruber expressed his feelings that waiting for an EIS could take 6 months and we're not going to be any further down the road on the project. Recalling Commissioner Sleeper's statement, in the long run, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, it won't matter if this project was delayed a few months. It will matter if the project is rushed, there are environmental ramifications, public health is negatively impacted, and the concerns of the city of South Haven are ignored. Mr. Head from Habitat answered Commissioner Varney's question about elevators. There will be no elevators. How can a 3-story apartment building be designed without any elevators? How are furniture, appliances, and equipment to be moved in and out? How will a current resident who breaks a leg or has a temporary step restriction be able to access their unit on the 2nd or 3rd floor? Designing a multi-story residential building without an elevator is not something a developer interested in the long-term accessibility of residents would propose. It is something motivated by getting by on the cheap. This is not what the city of South Haven needs or deserves for its residents. This much-needed development needs to be a source of pride for future residents and the city. 3-story residential buildings without elevators would not be a source of pride. It would be deemed impractical, short-sighted, and cheaply constructed. A development lacking adequate parking will also not be a source of pride. It will be a constant reminder of a developer's decision that is not practical for South Haven, a community with residents who depend on personal car transportation for work, school, shopping, and medical needs. The developer has consistently pursued the most intense use of the property, with no response to the community's concerns. Complying with city requirements for an EIS will also provide a much-needed opportunity for the city to require Habitat to submit a revised plan, both with elevators for the 3-story buildings and with a reduced density in the proposed buildings to be at least the level needed to meet city parking ordinances. Please require this EIS and please request Habitat provide a revised plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nancy Nett.
Nancy Nat, 125 Elkenberg. I support quality affordable housing. I'm here to say that the PUD presented by Habitat is incomplete, and the motion to introduce the PUD application for the Overton site is premature and should not be voted on tonight. It is incomplete because it is missing the complete and proper environmental impact statement. First, some legislative history. The EIS was voted on unanimously and approved by the Planning Commission in the spring of 2021 and unanimously approved by City Council in the summer of 2021. The clarification in the updated ordinance made by our city attorney was rationalized so that all developers would have to abide by the same playing field. In other words, no developer should be shown bias. In the language, I quote what our attorney said. Quote, I would not note that I am a little bit troubled by the word may, as there is no criteria defining when the Planning Commission should exercise its discretion to require an EIS. My worry is that if they require it for some developers but not others, developers will claim unfair treatment. My second point is the environmental 2015 report. This 6-year-old environmental report from 2015 does not suffice because it is outdated. The environmental report was done on an industrial site as part of an industrial cleanup. According to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources that is referenced in the EIS, it clearly states that properties over 5 years old need to be reevaluated if there have been any changes in the property. Rezoning from industrial to residential is a major change in that property. The criteria for residential property has a much higher standard than industrial cleanup. In addition, environmental engineers from Global Remediation have suggested that the trichloroethylene, a highly toxic carcinogen, be tested for at the Overton site because that chemical was used in the Overton factory. That testing has not been done. As far as the waiver ordinance goes, the waiver states, the waiver shall include mechanisms to be utilized for the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare in lieu of the regulations from which the changes or waivers are sought. Clearly, circumventing what is required in the EIS and using an outdated environmental report does not meet the stated requirements of this waiver. To sum this up, I would like to, it sounds like Councilman Sleeper's getting a lot of accolades here tonight, but he did say, and I agree, that this property will be around for a lot longer than any of us. I agree that there is no rush to push this through City Council. Should appropriately adopt an ordinance to provide another layer of protection for people living on this property. In conclusion, I would like to say the PUD is incomplete due to an integral missing EIS report. Habitat should be responsible to provide the environmental impact statement. Habitat should pay for it. An environmental consultant or engineer should author the report. This is not a boilerplate report. This is a report that adds an updated, current analysis and layer of protection for the citizens of South Haven and for the people who will be living on that property. No waiver should be granted. This is a quote from our attorney, Catherine Kaufman. When I read through this legislative history for the EIS zoning ordinance text amendment, I am completely flabbergasted at how this has played out. There is no apparent ability to waive the EIS requirement. This is beyond disturbing. Why is the city more than eager to release this developer from a recently adopted and endorsed ordinance requirement? This is a very important project to the entire city. Why wouldn't the newly adopted ordinance requirement be applied? Why is the developer's funding deadline more important than the health and safety of the existing residents, neighbors, people who will be living on that property, and taxpayers of the city of South Haven? Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Beck.
Lisa Beck, 879 Monroe Boulevard. I'm going to try and read this, but I don't usually do it that way, so it might be a little awkward. Anyway, I do agree with everything that the people in front of me said about the EIS. I think, especially if we're going to do the cleanup in phase 2 and 3, the city will still own the property. Thank you. And that does leave it open to liability. No matter what you say, if you still own the property and people are getting sick and having cancer and different things, there's going to be a problem. During the Planning Commission meeting, I sort of think that I didn't make myself clear, which can I understand. But Councilman Neese mentioned about growing up in a one-bedroom and how happy he was when we were talking about density, and that he grew up with 3 boys on one bedroom, and it was great. He also mentioned that he and his wife grew up in lived in a one-bedroom while she was working, and that was great. I don't argue those points. I come from a family of 8, and I lived in a one-bedroom with my husband for 16 marital bliss years. Very tight corners, but that's why I think the density of Overton is a lot. But that's not my point. My point is that the there's 88 one-bedroom apartments in that, of the 144 units. Under Michigan law, you can't have any children in the one bedroom. A single mother can't move in unless it's a two-bedroom. If she is fortunate enough to have a boy and a girl, she has to live in a three-bedroom. That's part of the funding for this project. I don't think that's what we want. I don't know why we have 88 one-bedroom apartments. I understand the need for workers, but if they want to have a child, they have to move. And how many three-bedrooms are there they can move to? Remember, I'm sure you do, the woman from Texas at the start of this many meetings ago, and she talked about not being able to live in South Haven because she couldn't bring her kids with her and find a place affordable to live. Well, she still can't. And I don't think that's what the city needs. I think it's just wrong. With the EIS is not all environmental, it's also the impact on our schools. We talked at the beginning about how we needed to have more families move in and that the Overton project would be for more families to move in, and now you can't have kids. I mean, how is that going to impact our schools? And I think in the EIS report that staff did was nice enough to do for Habitat, the part about the school was kind of left out. It was a couple opinions. We don't need opinions, we need data. What is this going to do to the kids in our school, and especially if people live there and have to move every time they want to have a child? For that reason, I'm also in favor of having the EIS. Several on the Planning Commission also wondered why there was not an alternative plan, as many of the people here have talked about. I don't understand why either. As a couple of people have said, 60 units could be done, 100 units could be done. Buildings without 3 floors that need elevators. Councilman Reese also mentioned that a lot of the one-bedrooms would be for senior citizens, which I will probably be moving in shortly. And without an elevator, research shows that one of the #1 reasons that people move out of their homes, and I know many of us can agree with this, is stairs. People can't get up and down the stairs. Now you can ask them, and they're all the seniors are going to live on the first floor? I don't think so. And I think that carrying groceries, just getting up the stairs, if you have groceries or you have a knee issue or you have a hip issue, you're not going to be able to live there. I think that this is based not on need but on greed. And I think that Habitat needs to go back to the drawing board. I think we're all for affordable housing. I think it needs to be done right, and I think it needs to suit the needs of the community. And that's what I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No other cards.
All right, no other cards. Make sure I got everybody before I go on. All right. Staff comments at this time? If you guys, anything else you were going to plan to share with us at the beginning here? So we heard from
Well, we
public,
have a
but-
number of, I think we wanted to kind of walk through what the EIS is. I think Attorney Curcio can help us with that. And I know that there's a number of waivers being sought with this PUD application. If you'd like, we can walk through all
Yep.
of those.
I think we should look at each one of those
Okay.
individually.
All right.
I'll go ahead. So the staff report, starting on page 108, talks about the topics that were mostly discussed or that were the focus of the Planning Commission's discussion. You see on page 108, we have the Habitat's the table of waivers they presented during the February 16 meeting. The first waiver is of the side yard setback. I apologize. First waiver is of the parking requirement. The ordinance requires 2 per dwelling unit, and they are asking for an average of 1.44 per dwelling unit. And the second waiver request is for the front setback from a 25-foot minimum to a 16 to 7 foot minimum. Sorry, did I say 16?
16 feet, 7 inches.
16 feet, 7 inch minimum. In the front yard setback, similarly from a 25-foot minimum to a 15-foot minimum. And then finally, the environmental impact statement to be waived based on their belief that much of the information is contained within other reports in the public record as summarized in a memo that is included in the packet starting at page, let's see, where is that memo? starting at page 121. The zoning ordinance authorizes the waiver of any requirement within the zoning ordinance for PUDs. There's criteria in the PUD ordinance for when those waivers can be granted. The Planning Commission discussed those discussed those criteria at the February 16 meeting, and then ultimately, as council knows, split 4-4 as to whether the PUD should be approved, and that split was largely pertaining to waiver issues. Some planning commissioners who voted against approval cited desire not to waive the environmental impact statement. Others cited desire not to waive the, I believe it's the parking and the setback requirements. Then the 4 who voted in favor found that the criteria were satisfied for each of the 4 waivers requested. With respect to density, density is calculated in a PUD by a formula provided in the PUD ordinance. The base of that formula comes from what's called a parallel plan, which is where the developer proposes an alternative plan or prepares an alternative plan that the developer is not intending to build. The purpose of the parallel plan is to show what could theoretically be built without a PUD approval by right in that zoning district. That plan produced a total number of units of, I believe it was 133, something to that effect. And then under the formula in the ordinance, because they have 26% density, that's more than 10% above the minimum requirement of, for open space. They have 26% open space, that's more than 10% above the 15% requirement for open space. Because they exceed that requirement by 10%, they get what's called a 10% density bonus, which brings their total density that they would be allowed without a waiver, I believe, to 146. And the density they're requesting is 144. So that's a long-winded explanation. They're not seeking a waiver of density. They're within the bonus that's granted by the PUD ordinance itself. If the council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. That's a basic explanation of the main issues the Planning Commission discussed.
I know, let's go ahead, but I know one of the questions that's going to come up is, we have the ability to send this, if we decide, we could choose to do something contingent upon that EIS, right? There are some options here, just so we're all, and you're looking for guidance, I know, as far as what we'd like to see happen.
That's correct. Council ultimately has the decision. They are the final arbiters. They are the ones who are making the policy, and here as staff, we're trying to effectuate that policy. And just to clarify, this is kind of what we've been asked as staff to do, is kind of work on this housing development, get it to these stages, and we've done a number of those mile markers already. And as you know, a planned unit development is designed to be flexible for a number of reasons, because there's many different issues with each site, and each site is unique. So there are a number of things, if council would like to have us come back and work on things, but yes, a contingency option is available.
Okay, because, the goal of this is to get this right. There's not a rush. The goal is to get this right. So if there's concerns, I hope that everybody here, let's state them, let's talk about it, and let's get them addressed. So, I don't know.
I have a few questions, but I also have to clarify something in my mind first before I can even ask the other questions, and that is during the Harbor Club discussion earlier this evening, you stated, Mr. Curcio, you stated that regarding the 8-foot fence issue, that we couldn't change that in the ordinance, that would need a variance, and we couldn't do that through the PUD. But yet you're asking us to change and give waivers here on an environmental impact statement. Square that for me, please.
So that was not a waiver requested by the developer. That was a condition. That is a good question. Could the council have modified that requirement? And the way that the waiver provision is worded in the PUD ordinance, it's a request that's made by the developer. That request was not. I didn't think of it in those terms, but in any event, that's a good question.
I'm just having a hard time squaring the fact that we have an ordinance that we did last year, I guess. And then now we have, I'm just having a hard time squaring that in my mind. That being said, my question too, some of my other questions are, in the parallel plan that you state that's in our package, I understand that a lot better now, the parallel plan and what it's there for. But with the parking requirements, if we don't waive the parking requirements and we don't grant the side yards or I'm sorry, the front yard setbacks and the side yard setbacks, if we don't grant those waivers, all of our open space and our bonus calculation for bonus units or whatever the case, however that's worded, all of those numbers to me change. That calculation changes. So, and the difference between common areas versus open space areas, I'm having a hard time squaring that in my mind as well, because all those calculations change at that point. We also have, when I was reading the PUD, our fire department has said no. Our engineer has a requirement in there, and I realize that we can make these all contingencies. But the one I'm concerned with is with the fire department. If we take another foot away from what the fire department is asking, what they're needing, all those open space and those bonus calculations, all those numbers change again. So it's my hopes. I've wanted this developed a long time, but at this point, I'm just having a hard time getting through why we're in the position we are right now. The EIS, I guess I'd just soon remove that from the ordinance the next meeting if we can, but regarding the questions I state with the calculations and it was brought up again tonight regarding the senior would take in their application to the state or whatever, it would take priority, and I guess it's a pretty good statement that was made regarding, I know elevators aren't a requirement, and that adds a lot of costs, so that's not up to me, that's the developer. But regarding the fire department and Mr. Dopp's detention area, the soil boring to be done, making sure that that's below the groundwater table or above the groundwater table, that soil boring be done so that we know for sure that that detention area can go there. Because if it can't, then that changes all of our calculations again. So to me, it's not enough detailed. And a little bit, I want for the public too to understand, I'm sorry, and I'll finish up, but I brought a development before the city several years ago, and it took me 4 years to get through planning commission, and I had to have every I dotted and every T crossed when I went through. I ultimately ended up getting approval, but I know these things take a longer time in government than they do on the retail side of businesses. So my concern is that we just don't have enough of our I's dotted and our T's crossed at this point for myself. And I don't think that we can, I'd like to make those contingent and continue moving this forward, but I just don't know how I make it contingent based on numbers that can keep changing with difference in plans. That's what I'm having trouble with right now.
Okay, that's fair.
So if that isn't giving you enough input, I don't know what is.
You guys got any more questions of Steve, or clear as mud guy? Got it. Want to come down next?
Steve went right in. My questions were just a lot more simpler, just kind of city government 101. The fact that the planning commission tied, it's still okay under the rules that we can take the lead on this.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's why we're here. And that, yeah, I guess my question, Steve jumped right in the deep end, and I wasn't ready to go there, so I'll let somebody else go.
I'm just wondering what would be the trouble with getting the EIS from Habitat?
Habitat decided the delay of getting the EIS. I believe they said it would take 6 to 8 weeks. and also the cost of getting the EIS. I believe that their preliminary quotes were $15,000 to $20,000 for this project. And their position is that the EIS would not be helpful in this circumstance because this is a city-owned property. There's been environmental studies done on it prior, and the other items covered by the EIS, which are again listed in this report that is in the agenda packet, impact on schools, impact on traffic, things of that nature, are things that that the city looked at in the process of looking at this project, because this is something that the city put out for bid to find this developer around the 2019, 2020. So their position is the specific circumstance of this project being city-owned, being kind of vetted by the city, essentially makes the EIS unnecessary. And again, the Planning Commission split on that question as to whether that was true.
Okay. And then I just have one more question about ADA accessibility and the elevators mentioned. Is that not a requirement?
I don't believe
for
so
them
under
to be-
MISTA, but I don't know for certain. But I would know that anybody who needed that accessibility would be located on the first floor of all the buildings.
Okay, thanks.
So Article 13 of the zoning ordinance describes the purpose of a planned unit development to encourage innovation and variety in land use, design, layout, and a variety of other benefits, particularly suited to the needs of the residents of the city, county, and state, provided such opportunities do not unreasonably create an adverse economic, social, or environmental impact on surrounding land uses. And because of that, the PUD process allows the waiver of requirements, provided those waivers are done in accordance with Section 1304. Now, regarding the three waivers Habitat is requesting setbacks, I do not have a problem with the setback variance. In my opinion, reducing the setback allows the developer to move that linear green space along Indiana and Elkinburg and combine it to make it more useful for residents. Parking. Along those same lines, having less parking allows for more green space, especially since studies indicate that 2 parking spaces per unit would result in unused parking spaces. I do not, however, see the same benefit for waiving the environmental impact statement. The basis for the waiver is that the EIS information is already available. The waiver will reduce the project costs and will increase the likelihood of MISTA funding. In my opinion, these benefits do not meet the requirements in Section 1304 justifying the waiver. Although the city has provided EIS information available in other places, I feel this is not in the city's wheelhouse. Thus, there's a possibility that something is missed. This is a significant development, and the EIS will help ensure this development fits in the community. The density of this development is acceptable based on the parallel plan review, but some still have concerns about the density, and an independent EIS can help allay concerns in this area. So I'm going to vote no.
Very
good. Well, first thing I'd like to say is 2 weeks from now, Habitat will be here. And I think a lot of this, the concerns they could answer and address more factually than we can tonight. And I'd like to get their opinion on a lot of these issues. Secondly, without going point by point, because we've already hit it, but parking as well within the parameters of affordable housing, which brings me to the first point that I think about. This is different. This is affordable housing, which has different parameters and different requirements. Mr. Kilpatrick explained it over and over again, and we're trying to meet a specific need in this town. And if we think for 1 second we're unique, and that's how we sound, this is all over the country. You cannot watch the news more than a day or two. You can't read a newspaper hardly without affordable housing coming up. So I think we have to be very open-minded and look at these issues and see how we can make this work. And I think Habitat has come out to this community over and over again, including at the Planning Commission, and have tried to answer questions. Please know that this EIS came as a complete surprise to them. They weren't prepared because the city hadn't told them. So it's a difficult situation, but I think a lot of this could be answered in 2 weeks when they're here. As far as the setbacks, one of the things I remember hearing over and over again from the community, especially those around Overton, they wanted green space. If we push those setbacks, we're going to lose green space, which is one of the largest things people talked about. And as far as the environment, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the details on this, but I do remember it came up at the one meeting. And Mr. Kilpatrick answered it. Habitat answered it. I don't know the organization, but that one organization was here. I don't know if it was Brownfield or whoever, and they talked about it, and they said there's all these steps that will ensure no contamination, or it'll be fixed before they build. And I have faith in them doing that. I just feel we're starting to get this thing pushed back and back over issues that are not going to affect the ultimate goal, which is give people housing. And I've said it before, when I ran for city council 5 years ago, the one thing I heard from resident after resident, who the average age in this town is now over 53 years old, that they were concerned they couldn't live here when they retire, and they want to sell their little home with a white picket fence and go live in something easier to manage. And I just feel we're letting this slip away from us, and that's my concern. And I just want to give it time, the next meeting, that a lot of these questions and concerns can be answered, especially by Habitat. That's it.
Okay. I guess I'll throw in my 2 cents. I obviously agree with everything we've been talking about here tonight. Thank you, public, for your comments. This has been a priority for 3+ years for us, but I'm in no rush to get this pushed through. It's never been the goal. The goal is we're trying to come up with some housing options. We've heard a lot of ideas through the last couple of years from our housing consultant. I think we're going to have to still spend a little more time as a city council and a planning commission to decide what that means. We've talked about, height, density, parking, all those things that we might need to look at to get creative in order to get more affordable housing. So there's parts of this that work, as discussed. I mean, parking, I agree. I think we've adjusted parking requirements before. We just did it in the downtown to facilitate more dwelling in the downtown. We went from 2 to 1, and it's worked, right? We've seen some dwelling going on in the downtown as a result of changing some of those parking requirements. So we've adjusted. If we look at, the setbacks, I would tend to agree. I think I can see the setbacks. If you look at the adjacent building, factory condos, I think it's like 17 feet back. I understand, why are we having to allow a variance when this is a new construction, but it does allow consolidation of green space. So, again, I can understand kind of the thought process. When it comes to the EIS, I understand there's pieces and parts we've been provided, but at the end of the day, we did, as a council and as a planning commission, say this was going to be a piece of a planned unit development or a piece of a development over 5 acres, so I don't feel comfortable allowing that exception. So I still just don't think we're ready. And I'm equally frustrated. I feel like we've asked for some alternative plans, showing us less density, and we haven't seen them. So I guess those would be my sentiments at this point in time. So I want this done more than anybody, and at the same time, I also feel like we're still a ways away. So, on that note, anybody else?
Well, I thought we were going questions, if we're doing statements. I feel like I was a lot like Steve in that I am comfortable waiving the EIS because I have faith in our city staff being consummate professionals, and they sufficiently answered my questions that any other EIS might have. And that I did have problems with the parking and the setback, but then listening to George, no, I'm not so concerned about it. And then there's, one of our speakers mentioned the schools. I can tell you that in the 98, 99 school year, we had 900 kids in the old high school. And since 98, 99, we're now down, we bounced between 550 to 500, and we have since remodeled the high school. So if you're worried that more kids would be bad, no, we can easily accommodate more. More would be fine. If you're thinking that no kids will come, well, that would be bad, but that's already what's happening. Kids aren't really coming. Okay. And thank you for the clarification. But then also just say that this is not a professional EIS because we don't have the school impact. The school will be fine. And I guess I'm not the professional in that regard anyway, but the school will be fine. Lincoln has empty classrooms, so we have plenty of room for kids. But all that being said, I think I do also kind of side with the mayor that we do need to dot a few more I's and cross a few more T's, like Steve said and one of the speakers said. So yeah, no sense rushing. But it is disappointing if we don't move forward tonight.
Is this something that if we go ahead with the March 7th meeting, that we could get some answers? This doesn't decide anything tonight other than allowing them to come, right?
Well, I would say that if an EIS is needed by this council, there could be an approval that's based on a contingency based on what's in the EIS. But I understand that based on Mr. Schlock's comments, that there's a number of other things that he would like to see. Specifically, how does, the plan change and how do the calculations change with the concerns that he raised? I think that we could get together some items, but I also know that whether or not the borings will yield fruit, I'm sure that won't be done in 2 weeks. So I can bring some information back to this body. Maybe Ms. Wilkins will be back. But either way, we can have the public hearing if you'd like, but there's a lot of information being sought here. We can have the public hearing, and you can determine and weigh the information that city staff can bring in those 2 weeks, as well as what Habitat can provide and be here as well. I think we have talked with Mr. Hawkins of EnviroLogic, and he was planning on being here on March 7th as well. So if you'd like to continue the introduction, as well as have the public hearing, we can work for that day, understanding that there's many things that council needs to see prior to any kind of adoption or approval.
Okay. And so to your point, it could be approved contingent upon A, B, C, and D. Obviously, that's what we said.
correct.
Contingent upon the completion of the EIS, contingent upon satisfactory answers.
It's surely not my intent to slow this down, but however, I just, before I can vote for it, I have to have some of those questions answered, and I have to have a plan that shows me exactly the calculations, because that's where we're at in our code of ordinances. If we're not going to apply those ordinances equally, I think we open ourselves up to more complicated matters. If that boring isn't done, and we find out 2 months from now that boring is no good, then that changes all the calculations in the plan they've presented. So as a developer, I know I had to do those all prior and was required, and I'm not trying to keep bringing that up, but I just don't see how we can do it without the information, and that is disappointing to me. I wish we did have an alternate plan to look at and possibly vote for tonight. So it's not my intention to slow it down, but I'm afraid I would have to vote no at this point.
I would be concerned about introducing something that is going to change significantly depending on some of the questions that have been asked. No. And right now, I don't see us getting something that's that different on March the 7th.
Which would only delay it 2 more weeks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If we vote and give straight answers to the developer where we stand, which hopefully I've done that tonight, then the developer will have some type of direction, but it all depends on how you guys vote. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. No,
I think we owe it to the developer to be very straight. This is what we want. This is what we need. And I thought I've done that since choosing the developer back in the workshop.
Tried to, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and by saying no tonight, I think that'll send a pretty clear message that they've got work to do. So, would depend on how people vote. How about if we got no other questions or comments, why don't we just roll call this?
Can I have the original motion? It was just for both, right?
Yeah, it was basically to introduce the PUD application and set the public hearing to occur on Monday, March the 7th.
That is correct. Okay. Arnold?
Yes.
Onuki?
Yes.
Reeser?
Yes.
Schlack?
No.
Sleeper?
No.
Smith?
No.
What's the tie vote, so it doesn't pass?
All right, let's roll on. We will be asked to receive an update from Police Chief Natalie Thompson.
Thank you. First, I have an update from our Van Buren County Chiefs Association meeting. We have those monthly. The Van Buren County Chiefs Association is working on getting out scholarship applications to students in our communities interested in pursuing careers in law enforcement. Each year, our association awards 2 to 4 students in Van Buren County with a scholarship towards their college tuition. Next, informational awareness meetings. The police department is working on presentations to educate vulnerable community members on various scams that have been present in our area. Among the topics are lottery scams, charity scams, Medicare scams, and grandkid scams. We are gathering materials for presentations and plan to implement these in March. And so far, I'm planning on possibly 2 to 4. I've reached out to the Housing Commission, so we're looking at a couple different venues. And we receive materials from the Federal Trade Commission, which is normally who we will refer people to when it's too late and they've already, lost some money. So should be some really good educational material. So we're looking forward to that. Also, I have an update from the Van Buren County Prosecutor's Office. So our new prosecutor, Susan Zeidermean, has made a lot of great changes. She has recently implemented a new form for law enforcement to use when we are investigating cases involving potential personal protection order violations. It's a new form, and it expedites the process by which reports of this nature are received by the court, and it eliminates some of the confusion for victims on the procedures, and it more or less streamlines the process. So it takes a burden off a victim. Instead of directing them to go to court, file for different hearings, when we take a report from a victim, it's a one-page report that we do. We attach it to our police report, and then the prosecutor does all the legwork. So it's a great form. Just started using it a month ago, so it's really good for victims and takes a lot of the confusion out of that process. And then finally, I have an update from the police department regarding the Icebreakers Festival. So for the weekend, according to Van Buren County Dispatch, our department, this is for Friday and Saturday, we had 50 calls for service over the weekend. There were 32 calls in the city and 22 in the township. As for calls directly related to the festival, we issued 6 citations or appearance tickets for open intox and disorderly persons, and also numerous verbal warnings for open intox. We were not able to make physical arrests that weekend as the Van Buren County Jail was under strict COVID precautions still, so we were limited to only being able to lodge serious felons, domestic violence, and drunk drivers. Those restrictions have since been lifted, so we can now arrest everyone. There were 2 bar fights that one included a pretty serious aggravated assault outside of Captain Lou's. The suspect had fled before we arrived. The victim was treated for head injuries, and luckily he was later released and is doing okay. We responded to 2 reports of missing children during the sled race. Fortunately, the children were located and reunited with parents. Saturday night, the officers wrote over 50 overnight parking citations. So it was a busy weekend, and mostly Saturday night was our busiest. But other than that, it seemed to have gone very well.
Very good.
Other than that?
Other than that. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for keeping us safe as always. All right. Next, citizens in the audience will be heard on items not on the agenda. So if there's something we have not discussed that's not on this agenda, come on up. You'll have up to 5 minutes. State your name and address.
Dan Agnello, 964 Everett Parkway. I just want to say that Icebreakers was glad to have that back again. We had a great time. And also, we were supposed to get a report on the STR costs, the administrative costs. When can we expect that? I think you said you were going to try to have something by the end of this month.
Yeah, I was trying to, and then we had a number of items that came here. It was pretty large, so we're looking for March.
Okay, and then the other thing is also about STRs. We're supposed to be at a tipping point on STRs. Is anything going to be done about STRs? I mean, I've been here many times complaining about my PUD has no limitations. And like I said, depending on what happens to lots 17, 18, and 19, we could have either 35% or 50% of Trailside Phase 1 being STRs. And they're not, and on Phase 2, there's no limitations to them on Phase 2. They could be 50 to 100%. So, you know, there's us plus the other 3 STRs, and if you look at Sherman Oaks or whatever one of the other PUDs is, their marketing technique is we are one of the few developments where you can make a business, you know, out of STRs. So they use that as a marketing ploy. And one of the things that was said in 2018 about exempting the 4 PUDs was that the city doesn't care about these 4 PUDs. They're not going to protect these other 4 PUDs. And to me, that's a slap in the face. We all pay our taxes. We're residents here, and they wanted to push STRs into these 4 PUDs, and they accomplished their goal at our expense. And I think something needs to be done. But the way things move slowly, I doubt if anything's going to be done. But we've got to do something to limit these STRs. And the fact that they would not limit them in these PUDs is a big mistake. That was done in 2018 when they strengthened the ordinance. When you had to have registrations, you had to pay to have $500 to have your business inspected and whatever it was. But at the same time, they exempted 4 PUDs. To me, that was a big mistake. And the 1-to-4 ratio doesn't apply to us. And so a lot of people have talked about this. The 1-to-4 ratio should be actually 1-to-6 maybe, and it should be on the same block, because if we were subject to the 1-to-4 ratio, I wouldn't have 4 STRs around my house. I might have 1 on my block. That's it. So I hope something will be done, but the way things move slowly, I doubt if it will. But STRs is a big problem, and if half the people that talk on Facebook, on the community chat lines, were here, you'd hear a lot more arguments against STRs. We've talked to hundreds of people, and there's not one in favor of it. The fact that there's too many of them, and they're not being, policed right and whatever. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else?
Mary Hasley, 726 North Shore Drive. I would just inquire of the city of the status of my FOIA requests. I paid for them on November 23rd. In the letter responding, they were partially granted. I was told it would take 3 months. I sent a follow-up last week because this week is 3 months, and I've not yet received a response on the status of them. It's not like I write daily, weekly, monthly even. It's the week before that I was told they would need up to 3 months to provide the response, and I'm still waiting for the status. With regard to ordinance changes, yes, it would be nice to have ordinance changes for the STRs. I note that back in 2018, Our attorney even commented that the administrative fee would have an offset of the total fee. And so we have been supporting STRs since the change in 2018 that was supposed to help our community. That's only increased the expenses to our community. And the cap ratio really needs to be addressed. So it would be nice if the city council would recommend that the planning commission reevaluate that in light of the issues going on right now. With regard to ordinance changes, I note that Mayor Smith noted the parking changes in downtown were changed from 2 to 1, and that is correct. They were by ordinance. And so if parking change, just like we are asking for changes with the STR with regard to parking, that should also be done by ordinance and not by waivers for PUDs. If people believe that the parking ratio is too high in the ordinance, they request an amendment to the ordinance. Waivers are not the proper way to do it, and I note that in the ordinance.
Point of order. This was already covered on the agenda.
It's a general matter. It applies to everything.
Good.
With regard to parking and waivers, there is actually a section in the parking ordinance that recommends that the developer provide green space so that if parking is deficient, there is sufficient locations to add the reduced parking. With regard to design of schematics for new homes built, buildings built, setbacks are with regard to property lines, not just streets. If you look at figure 2.7 in our zoning ordinance, the setbacks are relative to the front property line, the side property lines, and the back property lines. And so as these schemes are coming across the city's desk, who reviews all of these proposals to make sure that all of the setbacks are properly against all of the property lines, because it's not just streets, it's front, back, and sides. And on a happy note, sort of, in that I was very pleased to hear the update from Chief Thompson about the efforts that our new prosecutor for the county of Van Buren is making to protect potential victims. Those people who hold PPOs can be very intimidating to have to go to court. And I'm so glad to hear that the prosecutor is taking that on. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else?
Hello. Kay Engelbrecht, 125 Elkenberg Street. I apologize if this is something that was on the agenda earlier, which it is, but
can't
could
go
someone
there.
explain to me what your tie vote means?
At this point, nothing will happen. We're going to have to come back and bring back something else that we feel is going to be acceptable to this group. So you've got a little more work to do.
So it goes to the planning
Tie
commission?
vote fails. It does not.
Pardon me?
Tie vote fails. It's not going to go anywhere right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? All right. I think we are to Ms. Kate, city manager comments.
Well, thank you. I do have an update. I think Griffin kind of made the announcement at Planning Commission, but we do have two new members joining the city staff. One will be Kelly Getman-Dissett, who will be joining us as our Planning and Zoning Administrator, as well as Chuck Warren, who will be taking over our Marina Manager position. We're very excited to have these folks come on board. Very excited to have Mr. Joshua Lee joining our South Haven Police Department as the third officer that we've hired since, I think, October. So I'm very happy to get that done. Additionally, as for STRs, as you know, we've had quite a few new building department personnel join us. One of them is our new code enforcement and STR coordinator. And so far, we've had 4 citations sent out for a $750 fine for renting with an unregistered dwelling unit. We've sent out over 10 warning letters for renting an unregistered dwelling unit. And I just want to assure council that code enforcement is being addressed quite vigorously with our new members, in addition to Code Enforcement Officer Rick Loper. We're very pleased with their efforts, and we're continuing to kind of incorporate these new changes with the staff. Those are my comments.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Kate? Nothing. All right. City council comments. Steve, start with you.
I've talked enough.
You say such good stuff.
Yeah.
My comment, just a quick one about the marijuana testing. I know Don Bemis and Joe Wilkins, of course, spoke very passionately about it. For Don Bemis to definitely, well, both men, I respect their opinions and thoughts. And again, I voted yes because it was creating jobs, and it's just allowing an existing business to expand. I do share Mr. Bemis's concerns about nibbling away, but I don't think that this was that. And should any further things come to us, yeah, we'll be able to put a stop to those kinds of things, because as people have mentioned, we've already kind of dealt with this at the ballot. Those are my comments.
Okay, very good. Ms. Wendy?
Hey, I guess I just want to say that I hope we can figure out a way as a city and community to move forward with the development of the Overton property to provide housing that our town sorely needs in a way that will make everyone, I mean, not everyone is going to be happy, but the majority of people will find pleasing. So I look forward to finding these solutions and then moving forward with it, hopefully.
George?
I agree on what Councilmember Anuki was saying. I do hope we can get through this, because I do think Overton there's a lot of good things with that development, and I really want to see us move forward on that. And I really appreciate, as always, those that came to the meeting and gave us their feedback. That's it.
Joe?
I think the worst thing for any city is apathy. And while I don't agree with all the comments about Overton, I'm glad people aren't apathetic about it. I would say I've heard more and more residents call me, email me, stand up here at City Council and talk about short-term rentals. It is an issue in this town, and I think it's the biggest issue facing this town right now, right alongside Overton, and probably even more so. I just hope all the people that have strong feelings, pro and con, come forward, because we cannot let this slide any longer. Kate herself said we could be at a tipping point. We're going to tip. Let's tip in favor of what the residents want. Thanks.
Thank you. Just wanted to, again, welcome our newest police officer, Mr. Joshua Lee. Nice to see him tonight and his family. And I guess really just reiterate, I think you're hearing a majority of us up here wanting to move Overton ahead. I just feel to bring this back in 2 weeks, we would be hearing a lot of the same comments, but still not have enough information. When we get the information, we'll bring it back. We've got work to do, so let's get the work done, and we will get this done at a later date. So I will seek a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.